So, welcome to Tame the Toxicity, recognising and addressing workplace bullying. We're actually going to start off just with three little kind of reflection questions. Please feel free to pop your thoughts in chat and just to kind of really set the scene and get your brain into the right gear, shall we say. So, first of all, when you hear the term workplace bullying, what's the first kind of image or scenario that comes into mind? You can just pop a couple of words just to kind of give us a feel in chat. That would be brilliant. Thank you. Shouting at people. Thanks, Kate. Yeah. Leaving people out, upset people. Yeah. Arguments, disagreement. Picking on members of staff. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Second question then. So thinking about a time when you actually witnessed or perhaps heard about a challenging workplace dynamic, what made it challenging rather than just a workplace disagreement? Bit of a fallout. What was the real difference in that, do you think? Again, just a couple of words. Both parties getting emotional. Yeah. Yeah. Emotional, picking on somebody, being unfair, verbally aggressive. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So, what do you believe then is the biggest obstacle to addressing difficult behaviours in the workplace? So, what gets in the way? What's the biggest obstacle? Avoidance, backlash, ego, personality. Yeah. Repercussion. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so thank you for sharing those thoughts. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Michelle MacArthur Morgan, founding partner of Jigsaw Discovery and creator of the Jigsaw Discovery tool. And my kind of background is I started off hundreds of years ago, it feels like now, in the hospitality sector, working both originally in operational and then moving through into kind of leadership and senior leadership positions before coming across into learning development some 25 years ago now. And my work during those last 25 years or so has taken me far and wide, working in organisations, public sector, private sector, charity sector in the UK, the UAE, and USA. Academically, I've got a background, a degree in psychology, and then for 16 years now, I have been a student of neuroscience. In fact, I was only on a call this morning. I'm part of a neuroscience collective. We call ourselves the Neuro Nerds, and we're a worldwide organisation. And every month we meet online and just have a good old catch up on what's happening in the world of neuroscience, and what we can learn from it is the most important thing. And I'll share something with you from that call that was very relevant to today's actual webinar a little bit later. So our key takeaways in today's kind of professional landscape, fostering that respectful and healthy work environment, it is, it's never been more crucial really. And our aim today is to equip you with the knowledge and tools to be able to identify, address and prevent, hopefully, workplace bullying. So over the next hour, we're going to be delving into looking at what bullying is, understanding its impact, exploring the neuroscience behind it, discussing some of the relevant behavioural traits, and most importantly, finishing with outlining those practical strategies for intervention and prevention. Our webinar, as usual, will be divided into chapters. Today we have 4 chapters. Chapter 1, workplace, recognising the workplace bullying, exactly what constitutes bullying and the impact on team members. In Chapter 2, we're going to focus more on the underpinning science, looking at the role of things like the amygdala, for example, and the impact on brain function. Chapter 3, looking much more at the linkage between behavioural preferences and bullying. And then in Chapter 4, the intervention and prevention strategies we'll be looking at. So straight on then into Chapter 1. Recognizing workplace bullying. So really what we're trying to look at is, what exactly is workplace bullying? Are And you might want to reflect on these privately, and certainly as we go through this chapter. What is workplace bullying? Are some types of bullying going unnoticed because we have perhaps too narrow an idea about what it is and what it's not? And an interesting one, are more of us guilty of bullying without really realizing it? So workplace bullying can manifest itself in many forms, in verbal abuse, non-verbal intimidation, and increasingly, of course, we've got cyberbullying. And I think it's important to distinguish right here and now the difference between legitimate management practices and bullying behaviours. So, for example, constructive feedback aimed at improving performance is vastly different from persistent personal attacks, which are really targeted and really designed to intimidate, undermine an individual in some way. So, what for you, and again, thoughts in chat, please, what for you are some of the behaviours that you would consider to be bullying behaviours? Belittling people, focusing too much, yeah, on one person, calling people out, blame culture, yeah. Undermining, keeping a record of things one person is doing wrong, yeah. Intimidation, yeah, absolutely. So workplace bullying is fundamentally defined as repeated, unreasonable actions directed towards an employee or a group of employees with the intention to intimidate and thereby creating a risk to health and safety. And that definition really emphasises the crucial elements of repetition and unreasonable, setting it apart from isolated incidents of just aggression or constructive performance management. And the intent to intimidate and potentially harm a targeted individual's well-being are also central to that definition. ACAS actually describes bullying as unwanted behaviour from a person or group that is offensive, intimidated, malicious or insulting, or an abuse or misuse of power that undermines, humiliates or causes physical or emotional harm. So in ACAS's definition, we see a broadening of the scope to include that subjective experience of the victim and explicitly acknowledges the role of power dynamics in bullying situations. Now, that power dynamics, the imbalance of power, can be formal, such as a manager to a team member, or it could be more can't say the word, of a result of social influence. So, for example, in workplaces where you get cliques forming, they don't hold any formal power, but because of shared interests, history, they have that kind of collective influence and power. So workplace bullying take on many forms. We've got verbal abuse, shouting, malicious rumours, social isolation, where we deliberately exclude people. We're actually attacking a very basic human need there that we all have for that sense of belonging. Work sabotage, setting people up to fail, withholding crucial information. Intimidation, yelling, hostile looks, indirect and direct threats, and cyberbullying, social media, email, and the last one, upward bullying, where a team member targets somebody in a more senior kind of position to themselves. There's also other more subtle forms of bullying, such as deceit, distortion of facts, minimising concerns, diversionary tactics, etc., which all can be classified as bullying. Now, it's difficult to give one definitive prevalence rate for workplace bullying in the UK because there are so many studies out there and every study has got their own definition and their own methodology. However, there does seem to be some kind of consensus of opinion with the majority of studies that suggests a figure somewhere between 10 to 20%. In actual fact, I found a Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development report reporting a figure of 15%. Now, according to the CIPD report, some of the stats there that they highlighted are on screen. A significant percentage of employees feel that bullying and harassment are totally being ignored by their employers. And 24% of employees think that these issues are just swept under the carpet. 15% of workers reported experiencing bullying within the last 3 years. Employees also reported experiencing, in addition to bullying, sexual harassment, 4%, and other forms of harassment, 8% in the workplace. A noticeable concern is that in the cases of bullying and harassment, 40% of victims indicated their manager was responsible. And in the CIPD report, they've actually emphasised that there is a lack of confidence amongst managers to actually address inappropriate behaviour. And they've actually called for improved management training to be able to prevent and tackle workplace conflict and inappropriate behaviours. So the experience of being bullied can have devastating consequences for the health and well-being of targeted individuals, and it impacts them on them both physically and psychologically. The constant stress and negative interactions associated with bullying can lead to a range of these psychological, emotional problems, including anxiety, panic attacks, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, insomnia. Individuals also might experience increased mental distress, fatigue, and of course, in the most tragic of cases, work-related suicide. Feelings of helplessness, confusion, manipulation, isolation are also kind of some of the feelings that, again, targeted individuals will talk about. Over time, bullying can significantly erode an individual's confidence and kind of their self-esteem. But not only is it about the psychological, the emotional kind of impact, it also can kind of create physical health problems from stomach and digestion issues, high blood pressure, headaches, and all of this kind of prolonged exposure to the stresses of bullying has been linked to things like chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, irritable bowel, cardiovascular, heart disease, etc. And so the kind of the cumulative effect of all this, of both the physical and the emotional health issues, often results obviously in increased absenteeism, sick leave amongst the bullied individuals. So let's just think for a moment about the impact on the individual. So the negative impacts of workplace bullying extend far beyond just the individual team members that are being targeted. They have a significant impact upon the overall performance, well-being of the organisation. So one of the most direct consequences is obviously the decline in employee productivity. So employees who are being targeted often, their work suffers. It can lead to increased errors, missed deadlines. They kind of have a decline in creative ability, problem solving, and just an overall decrease in their performance. Also has a profound impact on their job satisfaction and morale, and not just for themselves, because the whole atmosphere of bullying, when bullying is present in any work environment, it creates a very negative and hostile environment, fostering a real kind of climate of fear and distrust that impedes teamwork and open communication. It can lead to that overall kind of sense of unease, dissatisfaction, even for the people that aren't being directly targeted. We've said absenteeism, sick leave increases due to that kind of the physical and emotional kind of toll that's been taken by the individuals. Employee turnover. Obviously, it's not hard to imagine that the targeted individuals may be kind of, going to leave an organization, may well resign. But interestingly, in most instances, the bully remains within the organization. And that for me was a really kind of, interesting fact. And the fact that, add together all these and the cumulative effect of all these factors translates for the organisation into kind of substantial financial costs for the organisation. So some of the underlying causes then, when bullying is taking place, it should really be seen straight away, a red flag, a warning sign that, something's going wrong in the organisation. It's a pretty dysfunctional kind of organisational culture. Now, there's lots of kind of reasons that this could occur. It could be due to an overly strong, authoritarian, competitive, unforgiving kind of leadership style. It could be down to the other extreme, a very laid back, hands off kind of leadership style where team members are pretty much left to their own resources. And there isn't that appropriate kind of level of direction and support. There could be lack of clarity around roles and policies and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable behaviour. I mean, do you actually have a policy, or is it made clear to all your employees what is acceptable and what is not acceptable workplace behaviour? High workload, staff shortages, highly pressurised environments. Team members themselves who have been bullied can become a bully in the future. And in some organisations, it's simply that bullying is so deeply entrenched into the organisational culture that team members just feel, you know what, I can't change it. You can't change it. Might as well join them. So I'd just like to take a minute for you just to reflect on that. Please make any notes. Share any of your thoughts if you'd like into chat. What are some of the warning signs that you might notice in a team, do you think, or an organisation, that bullying is occurring? What are some of those early warning signs that you should just have an awareness of and be on the lookout for? Individual withdrawal. Yeah. Favourites, yes. Time off, sickness, increased sickness, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Whenever there's any kind of real kind of changes, when your top performers stop being top performers, feeling of dread, yeah. People who look unhappy, who are unhappy. Missed deadlines, lateness, seen people being excluded from conversations, maybe most of the team go around and take a coffee break together occasionally or whatever, and there's people left out. Gossip, yeah, another great one. Thanks, Karen. Okay, so let's move on to chapter 2 now and just have a look at some of the kind of the science surrounding it. So we've defined the bullying and explored its broad kind of impact. So now we want to look into the human brain to try and understand a bit more why bullying has such a profound effect and possibly why it even occurs. And understanding the kind of the neuroscience behind these kind of dynamics can provide us with some really vital insights that can inform our strategies for prevention and intervention, which we'll talk about later. At the heart of the brain is our emotional processing center, the amygdala, often referred to as the fear center or the threat detector. And this is shown by the red arrow on screen at the moment, an almond-shaped kind of structure it's often described of, is part of our network of threat detection and threat response. So when we perceive a threat, whether it's a physical danger or a social threat like bullying, the amygdala is triggered into action. And a rapid automatic response is triggered, which then prepares our body for what we refer to as the fight, flight, or freeze response. So, in a workplace bullying scenario where physical fighting or fleeing might not be an option, individuals often experience that freeze response. They get that feeling of being paralyzed, unable to kind of react or speak up. And this is actually a hardwired survival mechanism. It's not a sign of weakness. And it explains why targets of bullying might appear to be quite passive or unresponsive in the moment. When the amygdala does detect a threat, such as bullying, it sends a signal to the hypothalamus, which then activates our sympathetic nervous system. That triggers the release of adrenaline and cortisol. Now, adrenaline gives us the rapid burst of inner energy, that increase in heart rate, blood pressure. What it's really helping us to do is prime our muscles to take immediate action. And cortisol, often called the stress hormone, helps manage our response to the stress, to the bullying. Now, in acute, short-term, stressful situations, actually, cortisol is beneficial. However, in prolonged, chronic workplace bullying type situations where stress, is prolonged, it's inescapable, then people get persistently elevated cortisol levels. And this persistent elevated cortisol level is detrimental to our long-term health. So it includes things like it impacts on our immune system, sleep, anxiety, and even can change some of the structural structures within our brain. In particular, it can change our the regions of the brain that control our memory and emotional regulation. And this is why, again, targets of bullying often report that range of both physical and mental health issues. It's due to the release and the prolonged release of cortisol. Beyond the kind of stress response, the bullying response, the power dynamics themselves play a really significant role in how our brains function during bullying. In situations where there's a real or perceived power imbalance, the brain of the person being bullied can become hypervigilant. And in doing so, triggering the stress response, they experience reduced cognitive functioning, making it harder to think clearly, to problem solve, to assert themselves, and it's further entrenching that power imbalance. Conversely, for the bully, well, the perception of power can sometimes lead to a lack of empathetic response. They don't have that empathetic response that people who aren't being bullied would normally have. They've got even perhaps a reduced awareness of the impact of their actions. Now, this isn't always malicious intent, but it can be down to a neurological consequence of how their brain processes dominance and social hierarchy. Just considering the kind of the role of mirror neurons and empathy in bullying. Mirror neurons are specialized brain cells that fire when we both perform an action and when we observe someone else performing the same action. And they're thought to be crucial for imitation, for learning, and critically for experiencing empathy, especially allowing us to feel what another person is feeling. And in cases of bullying, there can be significant empathy gap. So while some individuals may simply lack a fully developed or active mirror neuron system for empathy. Others, particularly those with certain personality traits, may deliberately suppress their empathetic responses, which can lead to a failure to understand or even care about the negative impact of their actions on others. And that, again, contributing to that persistent nature of bullying behaviour. While the effects of bullying on the brain can be severe, neuroplasticity of the brain can offer us hope. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to form new neural connections, and that goes on throughout our whole life until the day that we die, meaning that the brain is not fixed. It can adapt and change in response to new experiences, learning, and interventions. So, for individuals who have experienced bullying, therapeutic interventions, supportive environments, mindfulness practice can all help to rewire the brain to help to start to foster resilience, to reduce their stress responses, and kind of restore a sense of safety. For those who are actually doing the bullying, though, neuroplasticity suggests that with conscious effort, higher levels of self-awareness and appropriate training, it's actually possible to develop greater empathy. We know now from neuroscience that empathy is something that we can develop. And only this morning, we're actually on my Neuro Nerds call, we're actually talking about a study which involved males who had got a history of violence towards their partner. And these males were brought together and underwent this study where they had to do everything with their non-dominant hand for 1 week. And that was literally everything. They could not use their dominant hand for anything at all. So brushing their teeth, writing, eating, everything had to be done with their non-dominant hand. And at the end of the week, what they noticed was there was a marked increase in the density of the grey matter, which controlled their ability for self-regulation. They'd actually strengthened just within the space of a week. There was noticeable strengthening of the neural network for self-regulation in just 1 week. Now, you imagine the implications that this could have in real life. If people who were bullies because of a weakened self-regulation or lack of self-regulation, we could actually change that. We could help them develop a stronger self-regulation network. So, what are some of your key takeaways from this chapter? How does understanding a bit more or knowing a bit more about the neuroscience, does it have any kind of, has it resonated with anybody? Any insights for anybody? Again, jot down a few notes, and if you want to put anything, yeah, people can change with effort. Thank you, Karen. Yeah, you can gain skills with practice. Absolutely. Lisa. Yeah, the more we strengthen our neural networks, because the brain will always go to the strongest network, the network that uses the least energy, because the brain is all about energy preservation, mindfulness, emotional intelligence training. Yeah, brilliant. So the key kind of takeaways, just in summary, bullying triggers are ingrained survival responses. It's automatic. It's not a choice that we choose. Chronic bullying leads to that harmful neurochemical imbalances, which affects our mental and physical health. The power dynamics can alter the brain function for both the bully and the bullied. The lack of empathy, which might be linked to our mirror neuron activity. But most importantly for me, it's that neuroplasticity that offers hope. So into chapter 3 then. A lot of research focuses upon specific personality traits and identifies them as being more susceptible to displaying bullying behaviours. And often these traits fall in under the umbrella of what psychologists call the dark triad. This refers to the cluster of those three distinct but overlapping traits of narcissism, so a sense of entitlement, superiority, Machiavellianism, so that's about manipulation and deceit and being calculating, self-interest above everybody else, and psychopathy, which involves a lack of empathy and impulsivity, antisocial behaviour. Now, individuals exhibiting these traits may be more prone to engaging in bullying due to their disregard for for feelings of others, their willingness to exploit for personal gain, and that drive for power or control. But it's important to note that while these traits may predispose them, they don't exclusively define them as a bully. Now, what these studies, though, have failed to kind of acknowledge is the difference between our everyday behaviours and what we at Jigsaw call our exaggerated behaviours, which occur when we overplay our strengths and preferences to the point that they become dysfunctional and disruptive behaviours. Exaggerated behaviours, though, on their own do not necessarily indicate a climate of bullying. Two other elements have got to be present. They've got to be frequent. So the exaggerated behaviours have got to be displayed frequently. And they've got to be targeted to an individual or a group. And I think it's really important we all remember that, we all occasionally have bad days when we overplay or exaggerate our strengths. That does not mean we are a bully. It's about the frequency and the targeting of it. So let's just look at some of the kind of behavioural preferences and how possibly if we exaggerate, our own strengths can actually become a bullying factor. So extroverts, known very much for being expressive, sociable, talkative, engaging, initiating, people who can switch from ideas to in thoughts and actions. They can easily kind of switch between all these multiple ideas and thoughts. However, when the extroverted behaviours are overplayed, they can be perceived very differently. So a talkative nature, for example, being overplayed may be perceived as being very domineering, dominating, taking control of a conversation, shutting other people out, excluding them, not allowing them to be heard. And again, do that frequently, you're starting to move towards the bullying there. Expressive, high energy, overplayed. It can be overpowering, it can be intimidating to other people, it can make people anxious, unable to do their best thinking. That ability to switch between many tasks, ideas and thoughts, overplay that. And it may come across to other people that, you're not interested in what they're saying, that you're not interested in what they're doing. So they might start to feel undervalued, not appreciated, ignored. So that leading again to that lack of connection and possibly social exclusion. The introvert, known very much for being a more private, reflective, serious, reliable, good listener. But when introverts overplay their strengths, they might be perceived as being impersonal, cold, which can, again, lead to feeling ignored, disrespected, not valued. They can come across as not being interested, which can lead to that imbalance of power and social exclusion. They can become unapproachable, aloof, leading to people feeling intimidated, humiliated, isolated by them. Within the Jigsaw framework, we have action-orientated preferences, known very much for their focused drive, ability to deliver results, direct, straight talking, challenging, determined, competitive individuals. Overplay their strengths, though. They can come across as controlling, impatient, blunt, disrespectful, argumentative, hostile, lacking in compassion, intimidating, arrogant. All again, which may well lead to a hostile workplace where team members feel they're every day they're fighting a battle, they're going into combat. So again, you can easily see here how this could lead to, if targeted at specific individuals or groups of people frequently. Our creative, orientated types, imaginative, visionary, abstract thinkers, energetic, love things that are new, novelty. They're curious. They're people who like a kind of light-hearted, more enjoyable type kind of environment, quite socially adept, impulsive, think on the spot. Overplay that, can become egotistical, frantic, undisciplined, hasty, inconsistent, over-optimistic. So if we think about being hasty and frantic, that can have a negative impact on the team, on individuals' overall performance. Mistakes will be made, unnecessary risks taken. Perhaps people can't even keep up with the whole pace of it, that energy level of the creative type when they're overplaying that strength. Being overly adaptable can be seen as a lack of focus, which can lead to that inconsistency, create confusion, uncertainty, lack of instability, frustration, anxiety, overwhelm. Caring orientated people very much value people, relationships, personal values, quite tend to be quite tolerant, laid back individuals, very much striving for a harmonious type of working environment, very respectful, helpful, supportive, empathetic individuals. How on earth, you might be thinking, could that type of person be a bully? Well, if they overplayed their strengths, they avoid confrontation. They let people do their own things. They become emotionally attached. They have their favourites. They become indecisive without consulting absolutely everybody. They want to involve everybody. So by overplaying and exaggerating their strengths, then, it can lead to that passive aggressive workplace behaviours. They can fail to address issues early enough, enabling conflicts to escalate, and an imbalance of power as they prioritise some people, their favourites, over other people. Our organised orientated people like detailed information, they're quite disciplined, process driven, grounded, maintains order, practical, have that ability for processing information, attention to detail, follow the rules, policies, guidelines, but overplay those strengths. They're prone to becoming overly critical, rigid, perfectionist, won't let things go, dismissive of other people's ideas, resistant to change, narrow-minded, cold, pessimistic, unforgiving. And that can lead to micromanagement. They over-focus on rights or wrongs. There's never any midway ground. They can be very controlling. They can be belittling. They can sabotage things, sabotage innovation, ideas. They can withhold information. So these are just a few of the ways that just our strengths of our behavioural preferences, when we overplay them, if it's something that we do frequently, if it's something that we target towards a specific individual or group of individuals, could easily be perceived as bullying. So again, what are some of your key takeaways from that chapter? Any thoughts it sparked there? If you want to pop any thoughts in chat, that'd be great. Yeah, the stress reactions of the colours, absolutely, Yvonne. Lisa, be aware of overplaying your behavioural preferences. Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, the kind of key takeaways is, sorry, Carol, never thought of some of those types being bullied. So interesting. Yeah, absolutely. The key takeaway is that, and it links into what Carol's just said, we all have a potential bully inside of us because we all overplay or exaggerate our strengths from time to time. But I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. What differentiates is having, we all have a bad day. And what differentiates that bad day from being a bully is that frequency and the targeting of specific people. Yeah. But I think it's something we all should have a conscious awareness of. Especially so in today's kind of workplace environments where we're under so much pressure constantly. Chapter 4 then. So we've explored the definitions, the impacts, the neuroscience, and the links to behavioural preferences. So now I want to move on and look at some of the practical strategies for intervention and prevention. And by far the best approach is a multifaceted approach, where we look at combining clear policies, comprehensive training, effective reporting, and aftercare support systems. Because really what we're trying to do here is just our goal is to foster that kind of culture of respect and open communication, which ultimately will create a safer, more productive working environment, a win-win for everybody. So, laying the foundation then. The absolute cornerstone of any anti-bullying strategy is the implementation of clear and comprehensive policies. And these, they're not just legal necessities. They should be foundational documents that set the tone and the expectations for everyone. The policies need to be explicit, define exactly what constitutes bullying in all its various formats, and clearly outline what behaviours are acceptable and what behaviours are unacceptable. It's also crucial to make it very clear that your organisation has absolutely unwavering commitment to a zero tolerance approach in regard to bullying. You might also think about actually integrating your anti-bullying policy with other relevant policies, such perhaps as your workplace violence policy, for example, to ensure that you've got that consistent holistic approach. If we get the policies right, this starts to send out this unified front, a powerful message, and it'll help everybody to understand, the boundaries. What is acceptable, what isn't acceptable. Comprehensive training. So having regular comprehensive training programs for everybody, employees and managers, is absolutely essential for raising the awareness and building skills and capability. It's important that all employees feel empowered to talk openly about bullying and openly be able to discuss workplace behaviours. So critically, everybody needs to understand what bullying is, what it's not, what is not acceptable behaviour, how their own behaviours may be perceived as bullying, and the exact procedures for reporting and addressing incidents. On top of that, managers should also get training to enable them to kind of delve deeper into bullying, focusing on recognising those subtle signs of bullying within their teams, how to intervene effectively and de-escalate a situation. Research carried out by, it's a huge Australian consulting company, EMA. They have done some research that shows that the majority of organisations, managers fail to intervene early enough. Unacceptable behaviours such as incivility, disrespect, and perhaps even kind of conflict in the workplace are not dealt with. They're left to fester. And it's not until they escalate to the point of serious bullying and harassment that any action at all is taken. So, and you'll recall right at the beginning in the CIPD report, they said managers should have training, should focus very much on developing these people management skills and promoting a more managers who are better and more sensitive, more empathetic, have higher levels of emotional intelligence. Because the key thing, and I've already said this once, is that organisations should aim to develop more compassionate, inclusive workplace cultures. So it's important that organisations recognise and acknowledge bullying as a problem in the first instance. And then when bullying does occur, organisations need to have clear, confidential and easily accessible reporting mechanisms. So employees who experience or witness workplace bullying need to be able to feel safe and supported when they come forward without any kind of fear of retaliation. So it's really important to develop that culture of trust. And HR departments play a critical role, not just in managing the process, but also actually explaining the importance of anti-bullying policies, perhaps to your senior team, your senior management team, advocating for their effective implementation. Once a report is made, then it's down to prompt, fair investigation. And by doing that, it actually demonstrates your organisation's commitment to addressing bullying and ensures that accountability is upheld. For the targeted individual, one other thing could be having a witness present with them during meetings, because that's a helpful strategy. It gives some support, perhaps helps the targeted individual to feel safer, but it also is more likely to ensure a fair process. And beyond the policies, training, investigations, we need to think about support resources and aftercare for the victims of the workplace bullying and any perhaps observers as well. So this can include access to counselling services, your confidential employee assistance programs, but vitally just encouragement for them to seek support. Now that support might be from counselling services and employee assistance programs. It could also be from trusted colleagues, mentors, if it's a unionised organisation, even from the unions. What we have to do is build a safety net around the people that have been affected by the bullying. So the other thing to think there is about our supervisors. Supervisors play a crucial role and they must be held accountable for the behaviour within their own teams. They are on the ground, the frontline people, they're the eyes and ears within that team, and they need to be trained not only to recognise the bullying, but also to intervene effectively and promptly. Nip things in the bud. Don't wait until it actually even escalates to bullying. Any signs of incivility, disrespect, address those, because that will hopefully help to minimize the risk of situations escalating into bullying. And finally, I just want to emphasize that importance of promoting bystander intervention. Empower colleagues to safely speak up, report, offer support when they're actually witness to bullying, because that in itself can actually make a fundamental shift in the workplace culture. You're turning people who are perhaps previously, currently, being passive observers into active agents for change. So that's all about building that whole, fostering that whole culture of trust, helping people to feel empowered to speak up, to take action. And if we can implement these, policies, strategies, organizations can collectively then create a much safer, more productive, and most importantly, respectful work environment for everybody. That brings us to the end of our session today.